Hey, this is Harmon Skurnik, and for our first episode of Skurnik Unfiltered, I sat down with my brother, business partner, and founder of Skurnik Wines, Michael Skurnik. We discussed the founding of the company nearly 40 years ago, how and when we joined forces, how we picked the wines and spirits that are right for our portfolio, and how our guiding principles help us navigate uncertain times. So grab a glass of wine and enjoy.
Cheers, Harmon.
Cheers, Michael.
I am Michael Skurnik, and I'm here with my brother Harmon. We're in our 38th year in business as Skurnik Wines, or formerly known as Michael Skurnik Wines. We both have the same parents, oddly enough, and so we got interested in wine because our parents got interested in wine. In Long Island, in the town of Merrick, on the South Shore, nobody was drinking wine in 1965, 66, 67. At that time in this country, in the United States, it was not a wine drinking country. People didn't eat fine French food. You know, it just was. It was sort of a cultural barren wasteland when it came to taste. I mean, I'm talking about beverages and foods and things like that.
But then mom and dad went to France in 1970 and got completely hooked. We were kind of ahead of the curve with mom and dad putting a bottle of wine on the table almost every night. Fine wines, dry wines, that was atypical for the time.
You know, I years later, I went to work at Windows on the World, which is how it all started, which was the restaurant at the top of the Twin Towers, World Trade Center #1. May it rest in peace. That's where I was going to be a musician. I moved to New York. I played guitar, and I went to a party. I found out that
I thought you were going to be a zoologist.
well, that was college. That's another story for another podcast. But anyway, no, I went to a party in downtown Manhattan in 1976 and met some people who were musicians. I said, well, how do you guys make a living? Oh, well, we work in restaurants. I said, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So I looked up. I lived in Tribeca, and I looked up and I saw the top of the Twin Towers, and I heard there was a restaurant up there. So I decided the next day to go up there and apply for a job as a waiter. And I somehow got the job without any experience.
My memory is a little bit different there because I was involved as well, because I remember we went up there with mom and dad for a drink or something when you lived in Tribeca. And I recall saying to you, the waiters here look like they make pretty good money at this restaurant. You were looking, you didn't have a job. And I said, why don't you become a waiter here? I thought I gave you that idea.
Well, when you get to be close to the 40th year in business, these kind of things are going to happen, where we have different memories. But I'm going to go with you might be right.
Well, I've said that to many, many people over the years. So, even if it wasn't true, it's true in my mind. All this time that Michael was getting exposed to the wine industry and working up at Windows, I graduated college. I had a business degree. First, I worked for my father for a short time after school. Really didn't like that. My father was a great salesman, which is why you're a great salesman. I think you inherited those genes. What I ended up doing was taking a break from that. I worked for him for about a year, and I took a break and went to Europe for 6 weeks by myself with a backpack and learned a lot about myself by visiting all these countries in Europe, which opened my eyes and my world to numerous things, including wine and food, although I was on a really, really strict budget at the time. It was Europe on $5 a day. When I came back from that incredible experience, I went to work for a company that did market research here in New York. Lived in Tribeca, the same place that Michael lived in. I subletted an apartment in the next building over. He was working at Windows and I needed a job. So I said, well, maybe, can I work up there too? Well, they don't let family members work there. Well, what if or maybe
his middle name is Wayne.
You suggested I go by my middle name.
It's not related to Bruce Wayne,
so
but it could be.
We didn't say we were brothers, and I ended up bussing tables and serving cocktails and working up at the hors d'oeuvre up in Windows on the World for the summer, and so I got that experience as well. Working for Kevin Zraly up at Windows really set the stage for you as founder for this company, but which happened maybe 5 years later. How did you found it?
It was not lost.
It was
not lost, no. I worked at the restaurant, so from the fall of 1976. After that, I went to work for a small wholesale company, kind of like Skurnik Wines, but nothing like Skurnik Wines. But it had the opportunity to become a company like Skurnik Wines. It was called Establishment Import Company, owned by a guy named Larry Rappaport. And then after that, I convinced him because I had learned during my stint with Kevin at Windows that American wine was actually a thing. Nobody took American wine seriously, and that there was an up and coming group of wineries, brand new wineries at the time that just started making wineries with the names of Chateau Montelena, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, Stonegate, Raymond, Chateau St. Jean. These all became famous and eventually sold, and became much
But they were
larger
brand new
wineries.
wineries at the time.
Right. So we went out to I convinced Larry Rappaport we should go out to California and find a bunch of wineries, which is what we did. And I came back, and so I was the only sales rep for all of these wineries in Metro New York. And I had every account. I had Sherry Lehman. I had Abramsky, of course, from Crossroads. I had Windows on the World. We still use the same numerical account numbers.
I think so.
Anyway, account
Well, Windows
001 was Windows on the World.
yeah.
And then 002, 3, 4, and 5 were all Smith & Wollensky Group restaurants because what happened was I was also a founder, not just of Skurnik Wines. I was a founder of the Winettes, the famous, infamous, unknown
Rock and roll band.
cover band that included Kevin Zarelli, myself on guitar, Josh Wesson, Richard Reagan, Joey DeLisio, Brian Miller, who was the restaurant critic of the New York Times at the time. We went out to California with Ray Wellington, who was running the wine program for Smith & Wollensky and everybody. And Ray and I hopped a ride in a car together down to Monterey for the Monterey Wine Festival. And he then informed me that he was putting together this special exclusive California program for the Post House.
California Cash, it was called.
It was called the California Cash.
CACHE.
Right. So we went, I said, look, Ray, I have a license. I have a wholesale license at the time because I was working for this French company. And I said, why don't I bring in the wines for you? Let's go find these wines together. And then I'll bring them in. I'll do the logistics and I'll sell them to the restaurants. And he said, yeah, that's a great idea. So we tasted together and we discovered William Sellium. We discovered Talbot. Anyway, there were 6 California wineries, the first ones.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of this company.
Wasn't Bonnie Doon one of them?
Bonnie Doon, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bonnie Doon was one of them. So that's how it started. We had 6 California wineries. We, meaning me, I was the only one in the company.
And you brought in like 5 cases of each or something.
We brought in the amount for the California Cash program. That was it.
Yeah.
And then I contacted the wineries and I said, I'd like to have your blessing to be able to go out and offer these wines to other people. And they said yes, and that's how that started. So we started as an American wine only wholesale company in New York. We had no sales reps. That's when we hired Tom Lynch, who was our first salesperson, and Dan Lerner was our second salesperson.
You didn't hire Tom before you hired me. Fast forward to 1989, which is when the business was starting to take off. I did a lot of like administrative work for you on the side.
The company you worked for had the Apple account, and Apple was a new, young computer company. And at the time Harmon worked for, it was Needham Harper Worldwide or BBDO, one of those companies.
BBDO had the Apple account.
And
made that famous 1984 Macintosh commercial, and it was the advertising agency in the world, really. Phil Duesenberry was the creative guy who created that commercial, and they were world famous. And
so they gave every employee of the advertising company a original Apple Macintosh, the one that looked like it would make a great fish aquarium. Yeah. And so Harmon learned, he was way ahead of the curve because he learned how to operate that thing. Because I'm probably saying too much, or maybe it's inaccurate, but I don't think you had enough work to fill your 8 or 9 hour day, and you were learning the computer. And so when I needed some price lists or some point of sale material, I'd be running around selling. I'd go up to the 44th floor or something, and he'd print out 100 copies of price list, and I'd go back out.
We also
and
had
sell.
the Xerox account, so we had the
free Xerox, free Macs,
top of the line Xerox machines, and I'd run his price list through there.
Double-sided and
after
stable.
I created them
This
on
was
the
mind
first word
bending.
processor. Create the and we had the very first laser printer. But anyway, I was working for you part-time with no pay. You gave me a bottle of wine every now and then, probably. But at one point, when it was when Kermit Lynch said yes to you, to give you a line of imported wines, that you told me to come to lunch with you at Keen's, where we had a really nice steak, and you had opened a bottle, or we ordered a bottle off the list that you sold them, of the William Sellium Lino Martinelli Zinfandel, 1985 or
86,
86.
86.
And, the company, we never really had like a business plan or anything like that, that we were gonna grow to a certain amount, a certain point, it was just very organic, the whole thing, just we started with these 6 California wineries and the French portfolio of Kermit Lynch, which gave us instant credibility in the marketplace with, wineries like Raveneau and Cocherie and Chevillon and
Jaillet.
Jaillet. The one case you got
We
allocated a
got a whole
year.
container of Jaillet every year. I don't know what anybody tells you. No.
Yeah, right. And so the business grew organically from there, and we hired our first salesman. Michael, you said earlier, being the founder and all, that the company for many years was called Michael Skurnik Wines. And then we decided probably, 11, 12 years ago, to change the name to Skurnik Wines and Spirits. One reason was that we got into the spirits business, right?
Well, just a small, short offshoot anecdote about we changed the name.
Offshoot away.
The reason we changed the name of the company was because we designed a new logo, the one you see about the office and on the back labels of our wines and spirits.
It was right about the time that we moved into this New York City headquarters
Right.
office that we
So
now
we
occupy.
came up with this beautiful design, which looks like a top of a champagne cork. And the designer had, Michael Skurnik Wines and Spirits. And we all looked at this. It's too many words. It's too many words. Something has to go. And it was either we lost spirits and kept Michael Skurnik Wines, which is what the name of the company was, or we lost Michael. It had to be one or the other. And I said, it's clearly we lose Michael because we're invested in spirits. We want that. That is who we are, and that's more important than my name continuing to be on
Also,
the name
we
of the logo.
said at the time that most people referred to the company as Skurnik Wines at that point.
Yeah.
Already. So, what was the origin of how we got into spirits? You want to touch on
Yeah,
that?
well, actually, my wife and I had a restaurant in the Caribbean and on the Virgin Islands
I remember it.
called the Fatty Crab. The Fatty Crab was a couple of restaurants in New York owned by Zach Palacio, and Adam Schumann, our beloved director of our spirits portfolio, originally he was a cook, and he became the guy who did the cocktail program for Fatty Crab. And when we opened up in St. John, Adam did all the cocktails in the program, and I got to meet him. And the restaurant sadly is no longer, but we got Adam out of the deal, and we decided to work together and start in earnest a real spirits portfolio. We already had Charles Neal's wonderful brandies and cognacs, armagnacs, and Calvados elixirs, and we had the great distillates from Hans Reiserbauer in Austria, and we started out that way.
At the time, isn't it true that the craft spirits boom was just underway?
Just starting.
Yeah. I mean, because prior to that, spirits were, your standard brands, your brand names, but there weren't these exciting new craft distillers out there.
Also, the cocktail bar movement was just starting. Death and Co. had just opened up. Mahahuel was, legendary mezcal
Mexican. Yeah.
bar on East 6th Street. And, it just became exciting. Then Pouring Ribbons opened where I think Adam worked, but Amanda Elder worked there. And we have quite a few people who worked there. And so all this was happening at the same time. And so Adam came on board, and our very first 2 spirits companies that we took on following that were
Green Hook?
Green Hook Gin, Stephen D'Angelo's great company in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and El Dorado Rum from Guyana. And that was the beginning. And those were 2 very important brands, still are in our portfolio. And it happened from there. It kind of grew.
You remember back before then, though, like even 20 or 30 years ago, people in the wine trade would say, you were either in the wine trade or you were in the spirits trade.
Yeah.
There weren't many companies that did both. and there was kind of a competition. Like uh, wine people would look down on spirits, and they would say things like, "Well, you're in competition with each other. If you go to a restaurant and you order a cocktail, well, you're not ordering wine." You know, and at this point in time in our evolution, we realized that there was a synergy between the two. And at the same time, restaurants were getting serious about their cocktail programs. And there's no reason why somebody comes into a restaurant, can't have a cocktail and order a bottle of wine with their dinner. So,
Like the two of us.
it works, they work in tandem, and they actually help each other out. And it's been just a tremendous addition to this company to have what many people consider to be the finest craft spirits portfolio in the business, right?
Yeah. And, I have a good friend who is a winemaker, and I was at his home for dinner. This is a couple of years ago. And there was someone at the dinner who was a critic and said, "Hey, Michael, so how's the spirits business going?" I said, "Oh, it's going phenomenally. It's like the fastest growing part of our company." She says, "That's interesting because I've spoken to a number of other local New York wholesalers, and they're not doing so well. And in fact, some of them are even considering getting out of the spirits business." I said, "Well, that's pretty curious." So I scratched my head a couple times. I think it might be this. It might be that, you know, we love spirits. We have a passion for spirits. We go home and we mix cocktails. We love the flavors. We love to experiment. You can't just decide to get into the spirits business because you see other people are doing it, unless you have skin in the game or you really care. This is a business of passion. So we continue to do well, and I don't know how the other people are doing.
Well, we often say that we have curated the spirits portfolio with a wine palette. We do approach our selection of what goes into the spirits portfolio the same way we do have done for many, many years with wine. And I don't know that a lot of spirits companies operate that way because they don't have the experience. So I think
I think
that's
it
really
has
given
to.
us an advantage.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, our other big advantage is the team that we have in our spirits portfolio, from Adam Schumann all the way down. I mean, this is a collection of superstars, people that have high levels of integrity and can communicate uh, the enthusiasm, the excitement, and the knowledge of not only the products that we represent, but cocktailing and the mixology part of it. And
With passion,
yeah,
and that extends to our entire sales staff and our entire staff at large. Portfolio management team is amazing. As I said before, it's about the portfolio and it's about the people. You have to do both well, and I'm really proud of it.
it really. I think it just comes down to the fact that we have passion for what we do. We have passion for wine and spirits as well, and love selling those things and turning people on to new experiences.
Yeah, wine is not just a product. Spirits are not just a product. They are the product of the people behind them, and the more you learn about the people behind them, the more you can appreciate tasting
And
their great wines.
I think the USDA actually has like a definition when they're talking about cheese. There's cheese, and then there's cheese food. Like cheese food is like an individually wrapped piece of craft American cheese. It's not really cheese. Government wouldn't allow them to say cheese, so they came up with a new term, cheese food. But most people who buy that think it's cheese. But I raise that because I think we should have something similar with wine, because there's wine, um, and there's fine wine, which is fine wine, which is who we represent and what we eat, what we drink. Sorry, comes from under 5% of the total production of wine on the planet. And there's industrial made wine, which I'm not looking down my nose at it. I'm just saying it's a different category. It's not the person that buys a bottle of Skurnik wine or Skurnik spirit is looking for a different experience. They're looking to connect. They're looking for the personality of the wine. They're looking to,
Authenticity.
yeah. When you pop a bottle of Beaujolais, if you've ever been there, you're immediately transported back, and that's the kind of thing that's the part of of the wine world that we're involved in, along with many other companies. We're not the only ones.
As Michael said when we earlier on, we were not a wine drinking nation, in the 1970s and the 1980s. We are much more so now, but we're still not. I mean, we have a long way to go. Fine wine, at least, is here to stay, and more people will be discovering it as time goes on, as young people mature. Wine has been around for 6,000 years. It's not going anywhere. It may not grow 10, 15, 20% per year like it has in some years. It may, flatten out for a couple of years, which is where we are now. But and there may be some casualties along the way, like wineries that are not well financed will go out of business. Distributors and importers that are not well financed may go out of business.
Also, the trends that we read about and people that write about and people want to talk about are real, but let's not get, overexcited about anything that suggests that we're, going to be in trouble as an industry. They mostly affect brands that have 100% distribution in the marketplace, whether it's Josh Sellers, for example, or Kendall Jackson, well-known brands, Gallo. As soon as, demand has a slight pullback, they feel it first. But everything that we do here at Skurnik Wines and Spirits is we're so far under that radar. In this country, I don't know what the per capita consumption is today, but it's something like 4% of the population drinks 85 or 90% of the fine wine. So we haven't even begun to scratch the surface with who the potential consumers are going to be. But we do know that this whole idea of people learning about how to eat right, and not, I don't mean healthy, there's that too, but how to eat well. What's the difference between a great butter from Brittany and, Parquet, or, on and on and on. And that's the trend. It's a revolution, really. I remember back, there was a great little store called the Silver Palette. It was a food provision store on the Upper West Side. Two women started it, Sheila Lukens and Julie Rosso, and they published a book. Maybe you've seen the Silver Palette cookbook, and it's, it became a standard, staple for most cooks. And the book, I still have my copy of it. A lot of the pages are falling out, but every 10 or 12 or 15 pages, there would be a box with info inside, and it has shallots. It's a page on shallots explaining to America what goddamn shallot is. So here we are. That's 40 years ago. That's around the time that we started this company. So when I started selling wine and I went to restaurants, they had one white by the glass, one red by the glass, not varietal, not vintage dated. Sometimes they called it Burgundy if it was red. Sometimes they called it Chablis if it was white. Almaden would do that. So there was no such thing as wine by the glass. So the transformation has been tremendous, and we're not going backwards. The best thing about this business really is the fact that we still learn almost every day. Kermit Lynch, as Harmon mentioned, was our first foray into imported wines. A few years later, we had the opportunity to begin working with Mark DeGrazia Selections. We met his Yano DeGrazia and Marco brothers. They ran a company out of Florence. It still exists. We still work with them. And we learned about Italian wine through this experience with the DeGrazias. Of course, we had had Italian wine before. We had had French wine before, but we learned through our association with Kermit Lynch, going to Burgundy, visiting not just Ravenel, Cocherie, and Jaillet, but we had Versailles and Cornas, so we had Clap and Cornas, we had Michel Rostand and Côte-Rôtie. So we got to meet the legends when we were young, and they were not yet old.
And we learned how to do it. We learned how to go into the cellar and taste out of the barrel and evaluate what makes a good wine. And the wine should reflect the place from which it comes. And by going to Sancerre and tasting 12 or 13 different producers over the course of the years and understanding what are the ideals that you're looking for, what makes a great Sancerre, you can then, if you have a palate memory, you can then compare what you're tasting today to what that ideal is. It's not perfection. It's, the quintessential. I would say quintessential. The French use the word typicity, typical, which in English it doesn't really translate that well because like typical sounds like it's just average. But that's what they mean by typicity or typical is that you mentioned Versailles, Cornas, nothing tastes like that. These are unique expressions of wine. You don't have to make the wine that way. Like you can come in to Cornas and bring a bunch of new oak barrels and make it taste like a Cabernet if you wanted to, but it would be atrocious because it wouldn't. The reason is because it wouldn't taste like Cornas, right? I think that there is a standard that you learn to respect when you taste wines over a course of many years and you travel and you understand what the wines are supposed to taste like. And then the subjective part is which qualities do turn you on? And I think that this portfolio reflects a lot of our personal tastes. There are some wines that are considered great wines that we wouldn't take on because they just don't speak to us. They're not our style. And for whatever reason, our palates and our style has resonated in the marketplace, thankfully. And that's one of the secrets, I think, to our success is that pursuit of that style has been consistent over the years. When people turn around the bottle and they see Skurnik on the back label, not only do they think that the wine will have a certain quality to it, but also they'll have a certain style to it that is consistent.
I wouldn't disagree with anything you said. That's beautifully stated, actually. Um, but the word style is a tough word because
Yeah.
it means different things to different people. So, we like Cavalotto's Barolo, their Cru Barolo, but we also like equally well, the Anfaso Rosese, which is a light red wine that you serve slightly chilled. So we like wines that are super well made. They reflect where they come from. They have less hard edges than some others. We don't like dirt in the wine. We don't like funk. Sometimes a little funk is good, but we don't want anything in the wine that covers up the terroir. We are mostly representing small craft producers.
They are family businesses as well. And there's a kinship and kind of a simpatico between us and our winery partners because in many cases they're multi-generational family businesses that have passed down 5, 6, 7, sometimes 11, 12 generations. And so that kind of like uh, similarities in our business style and our family business approach really resonates with our wineries. They love to work with us because we're sort of like them in
All
that way.
through the years, when we would visit cellars around the world, it was either two brothers or a brother and a sister or two sisters. It's siblings. So when there was a natural affinity
Mhm.
there when they
As
saw that.
opposed to, a company who's not like us, the corporate run company that may be backed by private equity, and they're very kind of impersonal. It's a completely different type of company to work with. Maybe they pay the bills, maybe they can attract some good wineries, but you don't have the same kind of simpatico that we do with our producers. I don't think they love the fact that we're a family business. They absolutely love it. And when we told them last year that we have a plan where our children are going to be taking over eventually, and as soon as this coming year, they're going to be taking over the day-to-day responsibilities. They were thrilled for us, and they understood that that's exactly what they go through. My son and daughter both work in the business. Michael's son and two daughters both worked in the business. His son-in-law works in the business. So I think that being a family business has been a great strength of ours.
And if we need inspiration, we can talk about our great friend Pepe Reventos from Reventos y Blanc in Spain, who's going to be one of our first, if not the first, podcast guest. And he is either the 16th or the 21st generation of his family
Well, you have to
who
listen to
live.
the podcast to
Yeah, you
find
listen
out.
to the podcast, you'll find out what the correct number is. But but they've been living in the same place, south of Barcelona, and it's pretty phenomenal, especially since for Americans like us, we live in a country where we're all immigrants, and we all came from. Most of us have all come from someplace else. For better or for worse, we get the strengths of that, which is why this country is so great, the foundation of that. But to hear somebody be able to go that far back in their family history and talk about it and get strength from it is really, really incredible.
His family history was the origin of cava in Spain. And today, Pepe and his company, Reventos y Blanc, which branched off from that, are producing the finest sparkling wines in all of Spain.
So his grandfather was the cellar master at Codorniu, which is a large, inexpensive, industrially made cava. But back when in those days, his grandfather went to Champagne to see how they were doing it, and they saw that they had caves down that were cut out of chalk in Champagne. So they came back and decided to call it cava. But when you visit Reventos, if you're lucky enough to go there, their property is contiguous to the Cordonier property because his grandfather used to be part of it. And so they arranged for us an incredible visit into They have at Cordonier, they've got cellars. I'm gonna
Really deep.
They've got like 6 or 7 or 8 levels of cellars, and they take you on a little. I don't want to make it sound too Disneyland, but there's a little motorized vehicle that takes you down all the way down, and it's filled with bottles, and it's
Millions and
yeah,
millions of bottles. Yeah.
yeah, it's
They're
incredible.
huge.
So yeah, maybe he'll get to say more about that than I can.
So this Skurnik Unfiltered podcast is going to be exciting to follow. I hope you find it exciting to follow. We have already recorded some really cool episodes with some great winemakers, and you'll get to learn about them, who they are, and their winemaking philosophy and what makes them tick. We've got episodes recorded with Giorgio Rivetti, who is the proprietor of La Spinetta as well as Contratto sparkling wine in Piedmont. We've got the aforementioned Pepe Reventos, the great sparkling wine producer from Spain who spends a lot of time here in New York and loves New York, and he's got a lot of wonderful things to talk about. Who else do we have?
Christina Turley is
Right.
gonna come by. She's
The
gonna stop
daughter of
by.
Larry Turley,
The
who's
founder of Turley Wine Cellars in St. Helena, the great Zinfandel producer. Quentin Paillard from Champagne.
doesn't he pronounce his name Quentin?
Quentin, yeah. The French is Quentin, but I thought it might be difficult on the oral scenario.
Christopher Lowen, the son of Carl Lowen, the great producer on the Mosel Valley. He's a terrific winemaker and got a lot of great things to talk about.
Hans Reisetbauer, some people feel the greatest distiller in the world, will be here. I guess he's going to be here with his best friend Bernard Ott, who is a great producer of Gruner Veltliner and Riesling from Austria.
Mostly Gruner Veltliner.
Yep.
Yeah. And Jason Kestner, the longtime winemaker of Kistler Vineyards in Sonoma, one of the great producers of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, going back decades now. Originally started by Steve Kistler, who now moved on to Occidental, which we also represent. But Jason is a terrific, fabulous winemaker and also philosopher. And there's Annabelle Thomas, who's the proprietor of Nick Neen, the great small producer of Scotch in Scotland, completely organic, one of the rare woman-owned distilleries, and she's really a fun person to talk to.
Yeah, and stay tuned. We have a lot more, but that's just a little teaser taste. Basically, the idea behind all this is to try to give you a chance to meet the personalities behind the wines and the spirits. I think that it'll be well worth your while to spend a little time with these people and feel a little bit about what goes into the production, a little bit about the history, a little bit about their passions and where things are headed.
It's one thing to listen to this podcast, learn about the producers, but it's very easy to just go to skurnik.com and look up a producer that you liked or that you're interested in, and there's just an incredible amount of plethora of information
Yeah,
there.
there's way more information than you'd ever want to see. Just go on the website, look up your favorite producer. There's YouTube videos. There's there's tech sheets, of course, and statistics more more than you'd ever want. And have a field day.
So, if you're a wine lover, spirits enthusiast, or you're looking to learn about the people behind your favorite wines and spirits, be sure to subscribe to Skurnik Unfiltered on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are found.
So thanks for listening, Harmon. It's been great sharing this podcast with you and all these 38 plus years. Cheers.
To the next 38.
Na zdrowie.
Skurnik Unfiltered is recorded at Skurnik Wines and Spirits headquarters in the Flatiron District of New York City, which is why you might hear some city noises as we go along, like horns honking. If you found the conversation interesting, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. You can stay up to date on our show and upcoming events by following Skurnik Wines on Instagram and visiting our website at skurnik.com.